Insight there. Thank you, Noah. The Mississippi River Basin Panel works to prevent invasive species from entering the Mississippi River region. Today, 35 members of the group visited the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies to learn more about South Mississippi's marine environment. Parker Boyd reports.
Some say dolphins are the most playful creatures in the ocean. These dolphins find a friend in Mississippi Basin Panel Administrator Elizabeth Brown during her visit to the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies.
We tend to think of freshwater and marine as being separate, but it's all interconnected.
You want some fish, huh?
The panel that works to prevent invasive species like algae from growing in our region came to IMMS to learn how it protects marine mammals.
What happens in our freshwater fisheries is impacting our marine species. We wanted to learn more about the marine environment and how we can work together to protect our natural resources.
Now that is where the Bonnet Carre Spillway comes in.
The focus of the lesson was the algae bloom that occurred in the Mississippi Sound after the Corps of Engineers opened the Bonnet Carre Spillway in Louisiana to prevent flooding.
I was not aware of how that created health hazards for the dolphins.
IMMS says 153 bottlenose dolphins died after the spillway openings.
We lost oysters, we lost shrimp.
Its president, Dr. Moby Salongi, thinks there's another solution to prevent flooding along the Mississippi River.
The river has become now very shallow, and so instead of adding levees, we need to dredge it so the water flows faster out of it and doesn't overflow into our neighboring states.
Everything from the top of the basin all the way down to the Gulf has an impact.
The IMMS says 7,500 bottlenose dolphins inhabit coastal waters between Mississippi and Louisiana.
That's a treasure.
Salongi says protecting the Mississippi River Basin is important because it's essential for growth and development of the region.
So we need to be really careful as people are looking at the Mississippi River and its effects, that we point out to them how those things affect Mississippi.
Brown says she'll work hard to prevent sediment from entering the lower Mississippi River Basin so that more dolphins can stay healthy and whole. In Gulfport, Parker Boyd, WLOX News Now.